Hi everyone, it's Angel from Nebula. So I'm doing a little video here with a little tour of the studio. So I'm going to split this video into 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to take you for a little tour through my little studio to show you basically the hardware and just give you a brief talk through it, and maybe about the workflow as well. The second part of the video will be about the software and the soft synths, and then the third one will be just a little demo of the hardware and the software in action to show you some of what I'm working on with the Exploration Pack 2, which is coming out next year. So you'll excuse that I've only got a webcam really for this, so I don't have a proper super fancy expensive proper camera for this, so it's going to be a little bit wonky. It should be clear enough, but I'm just literally holding the camera, so I'll do my best with that. I'll probably show you parts and then come over to the microphone, because the microphone is on the side of the room, so I'll have to lean back so I can talk to you all. So I'll do my best with it, and hope it gives you a little insight of where I work on music packs and VMX. So I don't think I've ever showed the studio before. So, okay, let's get on with it. So I'll show you some of the units on the left, some of the rack units. See what we've got here. Switches on, you see those needles go up in a few seconds. And we got the preamps here. So what you're looking at, the 2 units at the top, I'll call mic pre's, as we like to call them. Basically, they are preamps, preamplifiers, and what they do is you plug in microphones or synths into it, and it brings the signal up to a certain level. These preamps have a few other tricks in the toolbox as well, and they can clean up the signal as well as bring it up. So they bring up the signal cleanly with a nice big clean sound. So the 2 of them do that. Just below it, you'll see a huge array of knobs, which looks a bit daunting to look at. Not so much so. That is a small synthesizer. It's actually one of the first that I ever bought in my studio. I got that in the 90s, a very long time ago. I don't have the heart to part with it, but it's got some quite nice capabilities, nice sounds as well built in that you can just use, and they always seem to be useful. So it does get used sometimes. Below that, my book's in the way a bit. Yeah, so that is called the Phoenix. It's a thermionic Phoenix. What that is a valve compressor. So a compressor, it's kind of like a fast moving fader, so it levels out your audio so that it's all one volume. It does that like as if you were moving a fader up and down really fast. Just a few other little bits that you can do with them, but that's it in a nutshell. And valve compressors, why do we use valve compressors? The valves are quite old technology, aren't they? Well, valves are analog, and what they do is they fatten the signal up. So for example, if you put percussion through it, like drums or something, it will make them sound very natural and very big as well. So you get that really big sound out of them. So you see valve compressors in large studios, and they're not so common in small studios because they're not cheap. But did get it from my old employer on the cheap, so I saved quite a bit on it. So I had to take the opportunity and get one. So yeah, it's a really good piece of kit, that. Couldn't do without that, actually. Just over here you can see, I'll move the mic over and get my camera ready. So we have the speakers there, studio monitors, and these are Quested, which very well regarded in film and TV industry, because they sound very nice with orchestral compositions. You get a very natural sounding, honest sound from them. So they're good for mixing, that sort of thing. And I believe people like Mike Oldfield, Hans Zimmer, they use a version of these. They've got a bigger one for the bigger rooms. It's essentially the same. So on my desk here you see a big clutter of gadgets. Let's have a look at this one. So this is a Hydrosynth. It's a quite a new addition to the studio. I've not used it in a music pack yet, so I'll do a close-up of it, show you it. And I just bought that because it lights up and looks pretty. I thought it would be nice for Christmas. No, it's actually a very, very capable little synthesizer. It's a wave table synthesizer. It's very good for analog-like sounds. And out of the box, there's some good presets with it as well that you can just tweak a little bit, get some interesting sounds out of. And it's very useful for like Blade Runner-esque sounds as well. Big fat analog sounds. Very, very good. Good little synth. To the right you see a little silver unit there. That's a CC121, which you use for Cubase. Cubase is the music software. The CC is a small control unit that, rather than using the mouse to click here and go into this menu and that menu and take forever clicking around for things, it's got some buttons that just directly perform operations. So it's things for like read and write, muting, solo. You see a little fader on there. Lots of EQ controls as well. It's good for mixing, and there's some buttons on the side as well, which assign for some common things, like moving the locator around the screen, saving the project, moving around the project with the dial, that sort of stuff basically. Then down here I've got a keyboard which doesn't quite look like an ordinary keyboard, and that's because it isn't. Okay, it kind of is, but it isn't. Cubase has lots and lots of keyboard shortcuts. I can never remember them. There's too many of them. So I have a keyboard that just has all the shortcuts all mapped out. See whether you can read that. So that's basically why I have a keyboard like that. So over on the right, moving across, you can see I've got a Roland V-Synth XT, which is a very good synth actually. Well used by groups like Faithless, and they did a lot of stuff with V-Synth. It's essentially three synths in one. One of them does stuff with vocals, as a vocalizer. The other is the V-Synth itself, which is like a modern sample-based synth. And the other one is a old synth called Roland D50. So if you've heard of those, from the late 80s. So that can do a digital emulation of the Roland D50. The Roland D50 was used on lots and lots of things, but if if you ever watch things like Star Trek, TNG and things like that, the sort of sounds that you would hear on TNG, from the early seasons to late, that's the D50. That's that sort of sound. That's one of my favourite synths, actually. Just above that, you see a small speaker, which looks nothing special. It isn't really. It's called a mix cube, and it's a single speaker, as you can probably see. The reason why we use this is to aid with mixing. So it's kind of like it's something that you play back a mix on to see what the lowest common denominator would sound like. It's also useful for testing mono mixes, because if you get your stereo mix wrong, then the left and right channels can cancel each other out and zero the signal, and you get no sound from some instruments or your whole mix. So that's to check that, and it's to check what your mix would sound like on a small speaker system or a basic speaker. So essentially, if you can get it to sound good on that, you can get it to sound good on anything. It will, almost by default, if you get it sounding good on that, if you put it on good speakers, it's going to sound great. And you just basically would need to touch up the mix after that, just fine tune it. So it's very, very useful, underrated piece of gear. Below that, let's show you this. Yeah, they all have silly names, don't they? It's another unit by Thermionic. And this one is called a Culture Vulture. And it is also a valve unit, like the compressor. But what the Culture Vulture does is it was originally intended as a distortion unit for providing like big distorted sounds to guitars, just out of a rack unit. Quite a premium big sound. But it started finding use, I think it was the Prodigy that pioneered the use of them with synths and sometimes percussion as well. And you get a very big sound with some pleasant sound and distortion. Now it can be very, very subtle distortion, or it can be in your face crazy distortion. It can do all that. I tend to use it with the synths or percussion, either with very low distortion to get the big sound, or put some proper distortion on it just to add some interesting character. And a little box you got below it, something I've not actually hooked up yet. I just got that a few weeks ago. It's a little Akai controller. It's supposed to be used with Ableton Live, and you can program drums and splice sound, playback spliced sounds by hitting the buttons. But what I bought it for is, if you just plug it directly into your PC and use it with Cubase, it acts as if you were pressing keys on a keyboard, and it happens to trigger the very bottom keys, and a lot of the virtual instruments use the bottom keys, which you wouldn't normally need to trigger sound changes. So I bought it for that. So you don't have to press transpose on the keyboard to go down to the bottom notes and then transpose back up. You can just hit the buttons on that. It makes things so much easier. So it changes expressions and articulation. So it's particularly useful for orchestral virtual instruments, things like that. Down here under the desk, pulls out, we have the studio keyboard, also known as controllers. So I'm just going to stand back a bit so I can fit it into the frame. It's quite a big keyboard. So this is what I was waiting for about 8 or 9 months for. It was a bit delayed because of the pandemic. I got it in the end. This obviously is the keyboard for the studio, so obviously you use it to play music, but you see it's got quite a few other things on it as well. So you have some pads there, some controls, some faders, and some pretty knobs, rotary encoders, as they like to call them. So what this also does is it provides additional controls for Cubase as well. So if you have a look here, you can see rewind, fast forward, stop, play, things of that nature. So that provides transport control for Cubase if you want to move the position cursor left or right, start playing, stop, record, go back. But things that you use most common, rather than doing all that with the mouse, you can just hit the buttons on there, because your hands are going to be right next to it anyway because you're using the keyboard. Got some dials and faders there. They're programmable, so you can use that to scroll through software instruments. You've got pads here which you can assign to anything, so you could set them up for like drums or something, so you could hit them and it plays drums, or you could program them to change articulations on software instruments or keyboard shortcuts. Rather than using this, you can assign functions to the buttons. And the faders, you could use them to change faders on the mixer, or assign them to other controls in Cubase for channels. So there's a lot you can do with that. The keyboard doesn't make any sounds of its own, so that's why we call them studio controllers, because it's literally a controller, really. So that's the keyboard. Folds nicely in there, so when I'm not composing, you can just fold all that away. Over here we've got some keyboards, so I'll show you the keyboards and then I'll come back to the microphone and let you know a bit more about these. So the top keyboard is Roland JP8000, which is from the late 90s. It's well known as a trance making machine. So if you think of things like chicane and things like that, there's a lot of music from the late 90s, early 2000s trance era, and it's still used today. It's still very popular. It's very, very well liked synth. Unfortunately, I don't really use it that much. It's a pain in the arse to control remotely. I have so much bother with it. I don't use it as much as I could do. Below that, it's a very interesting synth. Actually, it's probably, if I had to get rid of all of them, I'd be hard pushed to decide which to keep, this synth or the Roland D50. So this one is a Dave Smith Ob6. It's a Tom Oberheim edition as well. So it's got the Tom Oberheim signature. This one is it's a modern analog synth, so it's a true analog synth. So it's not pretending to be analog. So it's not like this. So you get very, very fat sounds out of it. So if you think of classic sequential synths from the 80s, then that's very much what this sounds like. And it's an absolutely brilliant synth. It just sounds massive. And again, I've actually only used this on commercial projects. I've not actually used it for a music pack yet. I am intending to use it extensively with the Exploration Pack 2, So this will start making itself known to you guys soon. Yeah, the OB6 is an absolutely brilliant synth. It really is. Below that is another really, really old synth. I mean, this is 31 years old or so. This is a Roland JD800. You can see that. This is another synth that was used extensively with things like Star Trek back in the day. It's used on dance music, some trance as well later on. Used a lot for chill out as well. It has a very good synth guitar in it as well. That sounds good, but I tend to like it for the pads. You can get some very nice big pad sounds from it. Yeah, it's a very, very old synth. That, I mean, the memory on it as well is battery powered. So if you want to save to the memory on it, rather than having like flash memory that will just last forever, if the battery runs out, then everything you've saved and all the presets built in will all be lost, and it won't be a good day. So that one works in that way. And down here we have an original Roland D50, so it's the real thing. So whereas I mentioned that as a digital representation, that is the real thing. Yeah, it is fantastic synth. It's a Japanese built synth. So this is 33 years old, and it still works. I used it fair bit in Triangulum. Used it quite a bit in that, actually. So you will have heard of a lot of sounds from that. So it was used in the Dark Nebula track, and it was used in all of the TNG recreation tracks. It does power up, it does work. So over on the right there we have the memory card, which also has a battery in it. So again, if the battery goes, everything on it is lost. I believe you can get non-battery ROMs for that as well, which won't fail. I think, don't quote me on that, I think you can. So that's much of the hardware synths, but wait, there's more hidden away. Let's have a look down here. So what you see there is the audio interface and the MIDI master unit. So all the MIDI cables, all the MIDI signals go through that unit at the top. And the bottom one is where all the sound comes from. So that's an SSL audio interface. Again, very, very, very commonly seen in large project studios as well, large studios. Now it gives a very natural sound as well. Very, very good unit. And then you can see yep, there we go. There's the cat, which helps everything just sound better. The cuddly cat. Yeah, you can see here along the wall, and if I look upwards, you can see more panels. So what these panels are for is, I'm going to explain this without going too into detail. Basically, in a home studio especially, they tend to be box rooms or square, rectangular, that sort of thing. They're not well suited to audio environments, so you get what's called reflections off the wall, which if you stand in the middle of a room and clap your hands, so you hear this tinny reverb effect. It's like ding, 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 like just very, very quick, but it's what this does is when you play back sound, those reflections are essentially distorting the sound that you hear. It means what you're hearing is not an honest representation of what the mix actually sounds like. So what these do is take away some of the reflections. They do one or two other things as well. Takes those reflections so that the sound that you're hearing from the speakers is closer to the real thing. Now, the home studios are still limited, and it's not perfect, but it does get you much of the way there. I mean, 50-60% of the way there. It's far better than nothing. So those around the room, they're on the rear as well over here. So around that, there's a couple more panels I need to get, which I do need to get at some point, but it ran out of money, unfortunately, so I didn't quite finish that off. I'll get 2 more at some point. Yeah, and then down here you see the room is carpeted. Again, if you had a hard wood floor, for example, or tile floor, it would make the reflections of the room sound even worse. So it's carpeted, but beneath it as well is also sound absorption layer and a layer on the floor for soundproofing as well, so I don't piss off the neighbour, basically. Yeah, so I never had any complaints, so I think it's working. Over here, the last things to show you. Over on the left, we got the UPS, so it's just power backup unit. And here we got the PC, which is what I produce everything on. So it's running Windows 10. It's using a 16-core Ryzen 5950X, 64 gig of RAM, 10 terabytes of NVMe storage, and it has a DSP on board as well for audio effects and audio processing. That's in the back. There's a card as well that links to the audio interface here, so it goes across there to provide the connection. So that's most of the stuff. One thing I forgot, there's a little black box down there I didn't mention before, right at the back. That's a headphone amp, and it allows all the outputs to go into it. So it's like a little hub where you can redirect sound, so it can go to the headphones, the speakers, or this speaker, or both. And down here we've just got the studio headphones. So we've got a secondary pair and a primary pair. And the reason why I have both is there's different sound characteristics of both. Sometimes another pair of headphones can highlight a bad sound, whereas the original one that you're using is so used to that you just don't notice a bad sound. You know, your brain kind of gets so used to speakers or headphones that it makes things just sound fine. In the end, you get used to them, basically. So by changing headphones or switching speakers, it's a sudden shock to your mind, and at that point you get a more honest sound. So that's one of the main reasons why I have 2 headphones, and it's just different sound characteristics. So I just might hear something that I can't hear with the other ones. So my main headphones are Biodynamic DT 1990s, which I got at the beginning of the year, and they're absolutely fantastic. Actually, we really like them a lot. So yeah, risk of boring you anymore. So that's my studio, basically. I got the old bookshelf there with lots and lots of stuff I've accumulated over the years. So yeah, that's a studio basically, and that's a bit more of the desk. You can see that. That's the mic I'm using at the moment. So that's a studio. This is where the magic happens. So I hope you found that interesting. So as I say, there's a part 1. The second part, I will show you Cubase itself and some virtual instruments, synthesizers, orchestral stuff. So I'll show you some of that. And then a few weeks later, I'll do another video just showing you a little bit of work progress on the Exploration Pack 2. So I hope you found that interesting. And thanks for watching. And thanks to all the patrons as well for your support. It's amazing. So this video goes out to all of you first, and then a few days later it'll go out to everyone else. And then part 3 of the videos, which will be for Exploration Pack 2, that will be a Patreon only video. So part 3 will be Patreon only. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.